The noose of debt tightened around Zara O'Connor's throat as her father's coffin was lowered into the unforgiving Nevada soil, his gambling debts becoming hers in the cruel arithmetic of frontier justice. At 18, with her mother long dead and no siblings to share the burden, she stood alone at the graveside, unaware that before the sun set on this bitter April day in 1876, she would be property, not a person. "Miss O'Connor," a voice like gravel rasped behind her. She turned to find Mr. Silas Donovan, her father's primary creditor and owner of Humboldt's Bank. His eyes, cold as a rattlesnake's, assessed her as if appraising livestock. "I've come to discuss settlement of your father's obligations." The small gathering of townsfolk who had attended the funeral dispersed quickly, no one wanting to witness what was coming. Zara's fingers clutched at the worn black shawl around her shoulders, her only mourning attire. "I have nothing of value, Mr. Donovan. The homestead is mortgaged to you already." His thin lips curved. "You have something, Miss O'Connor, yourself." The blood drained from her face. "Sir, Madame Lucille at the Silver Spur has agreed to buy your contract. 3 years of service will clear your father's debt." He extended a document. "Your signature, please." A brothel, the word barely escaped her lips. "I cannot, you will, or face imprisonment for debt. Your choice, Miss O'Connor, prison or the Silver Spur." Zara's hand trembled as she took the pen he offered. 3 years. 3 years of her life to pay for her father's weakness. The ink bled into the paper as she signed, each curve of her name a betrayal of the future she had once imagined. "You begin tonight," Donovan said, tucking the contract into his coat. "Madame Lucille expects you within the hour." The walk to the Silver Spur was the longest of Zara's life. Located on the eastern edge of Humboldt, the 2-story building stood apart from the respectable businesses of Main Street. Its red-painted exterior and ornate windows marked it clearly for what it was. Music spilled from the doorway, along with the sounds of men's laughter and women's practiced giggles. Zara paused at the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was to be her life now. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The interior was surprisingly elegant crystal chandeliers, velvet upholstered furniture, gilded mirrors reflecting the glow of oil lamps. A piano player in the corner tapped out a lively tune while several girls in colorful satin dresses mingled with men drinking whiskey. "You must be the O'Connor girl." A tall woman with copper-colored hair piled atop her head approached. Despite being well into her 40s, Madame Lucille retained a striking beauty. Her green eyes assessed Zara critically. "Yes, madam," Zara replied, her voice barely audible over the piano. "Follow me." The madam led her through the main parlor toward a back staircase. "Donovan says you're to work off your father's debts. That means you belong to me now, understand? For 3 years, Zara clarified, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Madame Lucille laughed, a sharp sound without humor. 3 years provided you're worth what I paid. She gestured to a small room at the end of the upstairs hallway. This will be yours. You'll share it with another girl until you earn enough to warrant your own. The room contained 2 narrow beds, a washstand, and a small wardrobe. A young woman with auburn hair sat on one of the beds, applying rouge to her cheeks. "Violet, this is Zara. Show her the ropes." Madame Lucille turned back to Zara. "You have 1 hour to get ready. I'll send up some appropriate attire. Your first night I'll auction you to the highest bidder. After that, standard rates apply." When the madam left, Zara sank onto the empty bed, her legs no longer able to support her. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. Crying would solve nothing. Violet offered a sympathetic smile. "First day's the worst, honey. After that, you learn to make your mind go elsewhere." "I can't do this," Zara whispered. You ain't got a choice now, Violet said gently. None of us did. The hour passed in a blur of instructions. How to dress, how to speak, how to move. Violet helped her into a borrowed corset and a low-cut emerald dress that Madame Lucille sent up. The fabric was fine silk, finer than anything Zara had ever worn, but it felt like a shroud. Green brings out your eyes, Violet said, helping Zara arrange her long chestnut hair. The men'll pay extra for those eyes and that innocent look. Won't last long, but while it does, might as well profit from it. Downstairs, the saloon had filled with men ranchers, miners, drifters, all with money to spend and desires to sate. Madame Lucille positioned Zara at the bottom of the stairs, announcing to the crowd that a fresh bloom was available for the evening to the highest bidder. The bidding began at $20. Zara stood frozen as men called out increasingly larger sums, her cheeks burning with shame as they evaluated her like a prize mare. $50, $75, $100, $200. The room fell silent at the new bid. Heads turned toward the bar, where a tall man in a black Stetson stood. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with broad shoulders and the sun-weathered skin of someone who lived in the saddle. Unlike the other patrons, his eyes a striking blue that reminded Zara of summer skies didn't leer at her but met her gaze directly. 200, Madame Lucille repeated, clearly pleased. Do I hear more? The silence stretched. No one matched the bid. Sold to Mr. Reed Kincaid, the madam declared. Zara felt her heart sink to her feet. $200. How much of her father's debt did that settle? A fraction, surely. And now she was to go upstairs with this stranger. Reed Kincaid approached, his spurs jingling with each step. Up close, Zara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. He smelled of leather and horses and the open plains, not whiskey and desperation like so many others in the room. Miss O'Connor, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I'd like a word with Madame Lucille before we proceed. Please wait here. Confused, Zara watched as he guided the madam to a corner of the room. Their conversation was brief but intense, with Madame Lucille's expression shifting from surprise to calculation to satisfaction. Money changed hands far more than $200, from what Zara could see. When they returned, the madam's face bore a curious smile. Mr. Kincaid has purchased your contract in full, Miss O'Connor. You're to go with him now. My contract, Zara echoed, not comprehending. But that would cost $3,000, Reed confirmed quietly. Your debt is settled. You're free of this place. Zara stared at him, unable to process his words. Why would you not hear? He interrupted gently. Gather your things. We're leaving. I have nothing, she said. Nothing but the clothes she wore, which weren't even hers. Reed nodded, unsurprised. Then we leave now. He guided her toward the door, his hand light at the small of her back. Madame Lucille called after them. The dress stays with the house, Kincaid. Bill me, he replied without turning. Outside, the night air was cool against Zara's flushed skin. A sleek black gelding stood hitched to a post, alongside a handsome buggy. I don't understand, Zara said as Reed helped her into the buggy. Why would you pay so much for me only to set me free? Reed settled beside her, taking up the reins. I didn't set you free yet, Miss O'Connor. I bought your contract, which means legally, you're in my employment for the next 3 years. Her body went rigid with fear. So you just wanted me all to yourself? No, he said firmly, guiding the horse away from the silver spur. I want to offer you a legitimate position. As housekeeper at my ranch. Housekeeper, Zara repeated skeptically. Mr. Kincaid, no one pays $3,000 for a housekeeper. He glanced at her, a slight smile softening his features. Perhaps I overpaid, but my motives are honorable, Miss O'Connor. You have my word. Why? She pressed. You don't know me. Reed was silent for a moment, focusing on navigating the buggy through Humboldt's darkened streets. I knew your father, he finally said. Not well, but enough to know he wasn't always the man he became. And no daughter of his deserves the fate Donovan arranged for you. They were leaving town now, following a road that led northward into the sagebrush flats. In the moonlight, Zara could just make out the silhouette of mountains in the distance. My ranch is about 10 miles out, Reed explained. Rocking K. It's not much to look at, but it's growing. I've got about 500 head of cattle and a decent horse breeding operation started. And you live there alone? Zara asked, suddenly wary again. With my foreman Miguel Vasquez and his wife Elena. They have quarters over the stable. Elena will help you get settled. He paused. I know you have no reason to trust me, Miss O'Connor, but I promise you'll be safe at the Rocking K. Zara studied his profile in the moonlight. There was strength in his jawline, but gentleness too. His hands on the reins were calloused from work, steady and sure. Against all reason, she found herself believing him. Thank you, she whispered, but I still don't understand why you would help me this way. Reed's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. Let's just say I've seen what happens to young women without options in these parts. It doesn't sit right with me. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic clip of hooves against packed earth the only sound. Zara's mind raced with questions, with fear, with cautious hope. After what seemed like hours but was perhaps only one, Reed spoke again. There's something you should know, he said. The debt your father owed, it wasn't all from gambling. Zara turned to him, surprised. What do you mean? Your father borrowed heavily after the drought 3 years ago. He was trying to save your homestead. Reed's voice was gentle. Donovan charged him extortionate interest, knowing he could never repay it. It's a common enough scheme in these parts. A rush of conflicting emotions flooded Zara: grief for her father, anger at Donovan, gratitude toward this stranger who seemed to know more about her family's troubles than she did. How do you know this? She asked. Donovan tried the same with me when I first came to Humboldt. I was lucky enough to have a good season and pay him off before the interest buried me. Reed's jaw tightened. Your father wasn't so fortunate. They crested a small rise, and suddenly the Rocking K came into view, a sprawling ranch house with a wide veranda, several outbuildings and corrals illuminated by the silver light of the full moon. A lantern burned in one window, a beacon in the darkness. Home, Reed said simply. As they approached, the front door opened, and a woman wrapped in a shawl stepped onto the porch. She was small and plump, with silver streaking her black hair, and she peered anxiously into the night. That's Elena, Reed explained. I sent Miguel ahead to let her know we were coming. In contrast, Elena called as they drew closer. Reed replied. She's safe. Elena hurried down the steps as Reed brought the buggy to a stop. Gracias a Dios, she murmured, then switched to English as she helped Zara down. Come inside, Nina, you must be exhausted. Thank you, Zara said, overwhelmed by the woman's immediate kindness. I've prepared the blue room, Elena told Reed, and there's stew keeping warm. Perfect, Reed said. Miss O'Connor, Elena will see to your needs tonight. We can discuss arrangements in the morning when you've rested. The blue room turned out to be a comfortable chamber with whitewashed walls, a braided rug on the wooden floor, and a large bed with a patchwork quilt in shades of blue and cream. A washstand in the corner held a pitcher and basin, a small stack of towels, and luxury of luxuries, a cake of lavender soap. Mr. Kincaid said you might not have belongings, Elena said, opening a trunk at the foot of the bed. I've put some of my daughter's clothes here for now. Carmela is married and living in California, so she won't mind. Tomorrow we can see about making you some new things." "This is too much," Zara protested weakly. Alina's kind eyes crinkled. "No, Nina, what happened to you that was too much? This is just decency." She extracted a simple cotton nightgown from the trunk. "Now you wash up. I'll bring you some stew and then you must rest." Left alone, Zara moved around the room in a daze. The events of the day, her father's funeral, the contract, the brothel, and now this unexpected rescue had left her numb with shock. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed her face, washing away the rouge Violet had applied and the tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. The nightgown was soft against her skin, slightly too short but blessedly modest after the revealing dress from the Silver Spur. When Alina returned with a tray of stew and fresh bread, Zara realized she was ravenous. "Eat, then sleep," Alina instructed. "Tomorrow is soon enough to worry about what comes next." Zara ate every bite, then sank into the bed, expecting sleep to elude her. Instead, exhaustion claimed her immediately, and she fell into the first dreamless sleep she'd had since her father's illness began. Morning arrived with birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. For a moment, Zara was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her. Then memory returned, and with it, uncertainty about her situation. Was she truly safe here? What exactly did Reed Kincaid expect from her? A soft knock at the door was followed by Alina's cheerful voice. "Breakfast in 15 minutes, señorita. I've left a dress for you on the chair." The dress was simple but well made, a pale blue calico with mother-of-pearl buttons. It fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the bodice. Zara found a brush on the washstand and tamed her hair into a simple braid, wishing for a mirror to check her appearance. The main part of the house was larger than it had seemed in the darkness. A central great room contained a stone fireplace and comfortable furniture, with doorways leading to other rooms. Alina stood at a large cookstove in the kitchen, turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "Ah, good morning," she said warmly. "Sit, sit. The men have been up for hours, but Mr. Kincaid waited to have breakfast with you." Reed rose from his seat at the table when Zara entered. In daylight, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered in a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his sandy hair neatly combed, his blue eyes even more striking than she'd remembered. "Miss O'Connor," he greeted her. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted, taking the chair he held for her. "Mr. Kincaid, I don't know how to thank you," he waved her thanks away. "Reed, please. And there's no need for gratitude. I merely did what any decent man would do." "Most men would have done exactly what you didn't," Zara countered. "They would have taken what they paid for." A shadow crossed his face. "Then they're not men I'd consider worth knowing." Alina set plates before them: eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, and biscuits with honey. The simple abundance of the meal reminded Zara how far her circumstances had fallen in recent months, as her father's illness had drained their meager resources. "Now," Reed said after they'd eaten in companionable silence for a few minutes, "about your position here. As I mentioned, I need a housekeeper. Alina has been managing on her own, but the ranch is growing, and with it, the workload." "I can cook and clean," Zara said quickly. "And so, my mother taught me before she passed." "Good. The position comes with room and board plus $20 a month." Zara nearly choked on her coffee. $20, that's generous for housekeeping. It's fair," Reed corrected. "You'll earn it. The ranch can be busy, especially during roundup and branding seasons when we have extra hands. When would you like me to start?" "Today, if you're feeling up to it. Though perhaps Alina can show you around first, help you get your bearings." Alina nodded eagerly. "Yes, and we must see about getting you proper clothes. Carmela's things will do for now, but you'll need your own. Reed pushed back from the table. I need to check on a new foal. We'll talk more at dinner. He hesitated. Miss O'Connor, Zara, I want to be clear about something. Your contract may legally bind you to the Rocking K for 3 years, but I consider you a free woman. If at any point you wish to leave, you may do so with my blessing and whatever wages you've earned. The sincerity in his eyes left Zara speechless. She managed a nod, and he seemed satisfied with that, donning his hat and striding from the house. Alina began clearing the dishes. He is a good man, that one. Too long alone, but a good man. Has he never married? Zara asked, helping to stack plates. No. There was someone, I think, before he came west, but he doesn't speak of her. Alina shrugged. Now let me show you the house you'll be helping to keep. The tour revealed a home that was far more comfortable than Zara had expected for a bachelor rancher. Besides the great room and kitchen, there were 4 bedrooms, a small study lined with bookshelves, and a root cellar packed with preserves and stores. Everything was neat and clean, but Alina pointed out tasks that had been neglected due to lack of time: curtains that needed mending, rugs that needed beating, furniture that could use polishing. The men track in so much dirt, Alina sighed. And during calving season, I barely see Miguel. He sleeps in the barn half the time. It must be hard work, Zara observed. Hard but good. Reed treats his people well. Alina led her outside, pointing out the various outbuildings: the stable where she and Miguel lived, the bunkhouse for the seasonal hands, the smokehouse, the blacksmith's forge. In the distance, Zara could see cattle grazing on the rolling grassland, with riders moving among them. How many men work here? She asked. 3 full-time hands besides Miguel, plus extra help during busy seasons. Alina smiled. Don't worry, they're all respectful. Reed wouldn't have it any other way. They returned to the house, and Alina helped Zara make a list of her immediate duties. There was bread to bake, floors to sweep, a basket of mending that had been accumulating. Zara set to work eagerly, grateful for tasks that would keep her hands and mind occupied. The day passed quickly. By mid-afternoon, the smell of fresh bread filled the kitchen, and Zara had made good progress on the mending. Alina taught her the rhythms of the ranch: when meals were expected, how much food to prepare, which rooms Reed used most often. He takes supper at 6, Alina explained. Miguel and I eat after in our quarters. Reed likes simple food, nothing fancy but plenty of it. The man works from dawn till dusk. When Reed returned that evening, dusty and tired but with a look of satisfaction, Zara had dinner waiting: beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie that Alina had helped her prepare. Something smells wonderful, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. He caught sight of Zara setting the table and paused. You didn't have to cook on your first day. I wanted to, she replied. It feels good to be useful. A smile warmed his eyes. Then I'm obliged to you. Let me wash up. Over dinner, Reed asked about her day, listening attentively as she described what she'd learned about the house and its needs. His interest seemed genuine, his questions thoughtful. I was thinking, he said as they finished the pie, you might like to write to your father's lawyer in Carson City. Let him know your circumstances have changed. If there are any personal effects from your home that could be salvaged, we could arrange to have them sent here. The kindness of this suggestion caught Zara off guard. I didn't think there would be anything left. The bank, Donovan likely sold the property, but personal items often get overlooked in foreclosures. It's worth inquiring. Thank you, Zara said softly. I would like that. There's a locket that was my mother's, and some books that meant a great deal to my father. Reed nodded. I'll ride into town tomorrow, post a letter for you. Is there anything else you need while I'm there? Zara thought of the borrowed dress she wore, but hesitated to ask for more when he had already done so much. Reed seemed to read her mind. Elena mentioned you'll need some things of your own. I've asked Mrs. Peterson, the seamstress, to come out next week to measure you for proper clothes. In the meantime, I can bring back some necessities, stockings, perhaps, or hairpins. The thoughtfulness of this man continued to astonish her. Hairpins would be wonderful, she admitted, and perhaps some writing paper if I'm to write to the lawyer. Consider it done. Reed rose from the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some accounts to review before turning in. After he left, Zara cleared the dishes, her mind turning over the day's events. In just 24 hours, her life had transformed completely from the despair of the brothel to the unexpected sanctuary of the rocking quay. She still couldn't quite believe Reed's generosity, nor could she silence the small voice that warned her to be cautious. Men, in her limited experience, rarely gave without expecting something in return. Yet as she prepared for bed that night, in the peaceful blue room with moonlight streaming through the curtains, Zara allowed herself to hope that perhaps Reed Kincaid truly was the exception that proved the rule. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Zara rose early each morning, prepared breakfast alongside Elena, then tackled the day's chores. Reed was often gone before dawn, returning only for the evening meal, which became a time for quiet conversation. He told her about the day's work on the ranch, and she shared small accomplishments from her own day bread that had risen perfectly. A stubborn stain vanquished from the study carpet, curtains rehemmed to hang properly. Mrs. Peterson came and went, leaving behind patterns and promises of new dresses within the month. In the meantime, Zara made do with Carmela's hand-me-downs and 2 simple skirts Elena helped her sew from fabric Reed brought back from town. The letter to the lawyer in Carson City brought an unexpected response. Not only were her mother's locket and father's books recoverable, but a small trunk of family belongings had been set aside before the auction of their homestead's contents. The lawyer, it seemed, had more conscience than Silas Donovan. We can send Miguel to fetch your things next time he goes to Carson City for supplies, Reed offered when Zara showed him the letter over supper. That's very kind, she said, but I don't want to be a burden. It's no burden. Miguel makes the trip monthly anyway. Reed hesitated, then added, there's something else we should discuss, your father's grave. Zara's heart clenched. In the whirlwind of recent events, she'd had little time to properly grieve. What about it? It's unmarked. I thought perhaps you might want to arrange for a proper headstone. I would, but I have no money to pay for one, she said quietly. Consider it an advance on your wages, Reed suggested. We can order something simple from the stonecutter in Winnemucca. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. Why are you so kind to me? The question had been building for weeks, finally spilling out unbidden. Reed's gaze was steady, his voice soft. Because kindness shouldn't be rare, Zara. It should be the way of things. He reached across the table, his calloused fingers lightly touching the back of her hand in a gesture of comfort. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she found herself studying his face, the strong lines of his jaw, the tiny crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, the way his sandy hair curled slightly where it met his collar. Reed seemed to realize he was still touching her and withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. I should check on that bay mare before dark. She's close to foaling. After he left, Zara remained at the table, her hand still warm where his fingers had rested. The feeling unsettled her, not unpleasantly, but with a flutter of something new and unexpected. She reminded herself firmly that Reed was her employer, her benefactor, nothing more. To imagine otherwise would be foolish. Yet that night, and in the nights that followed, Her dreams were filled with blue eyes and gentle hands. Spring bloomed fully across the rocking quay, painting the rangeland with wildflowers and fresh grass. Zara found herself spending more time outdoors hanging laundry, tending the kitchen garden Alina had started, occasionally walking to the hilltop behind the house where the view stretched for miles in every direction. It was during one such walk that Reed found her, on a rare afternoon when he'd returned early from checking the north pasture. Zara stood watching a hawk circle lazily overhead, her skirts billowing in the breeze, her hair loose for once streaming behind her like a chestnut banner. "It's something, isn't it?" Reed's voice startled her. He stood a few paces away, his horse grazing nearby. "This view never gets old." "It's beautiful," she agreed. "So different from what I knew growing up. You were born in the East." He moved to stand beside her, his gaze on the distant mountains. "Pennsylvania. My father brought us west when I was 10 after my mother died. He thought there would be more opportunities in Nevada." Zara shook her head. "I'm not sure he ever found what he was looking for." "Few do," Reed said quietly. "Most of us who came west were chasing something: fortune, freedom, a fresh start." "What were you chasing?" He was silent for a long moment. "Peace, maybe. After the war, Pennsylvania felt crowded with ghosts." Zara turned to him, surprised. "You're from Pennsylvania, too?" "Lancaster County. My family had a farm there." His expression grew distant. "I enlisted in '63, came home in '65 to find my parents dead from influenza and the farm sold for taxes. There was nothing to keep me there." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, understanding now why he might have felt compelled to help the daughter of another Pennsylvania transplant. Reed shrugged. "It was a long time ago. The war changed everything for a lot of people." He glanced at her. "How old were you when your mother passed?" 9. Consumption. Zara hugged herself against a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the gentle spring day. "My father was never the same afterward. He loved her desperately." "I can understand that kind of love," Reed said, his voice so low Zara wondered if she was meant to hear it. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them: recognition, perhaps of shared loss, shared origins, shared understanding. For a heartbeat too long, neither looked away. Then Reed's horse snorted and pawed the ground, breaking the moment. "I should get back," Reed said. "Miguel's expecting me to help with that broken fence in the south pasture." "And I should start supper," Zara replied, suddenly conscious of her wind-blown hair and flushed cheeks. They walked down the hill together, a comfortable silence between them. At the base, their paths would diverge: Reed to the stables, Zara to the house. But Reed paused, turning to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Zara," he began, then hesitated. "I wanted to say, having you here these past weeks has made the ranch feel more like a home than it has in years." Before she could respond, he touched the brim of his hat in a brief gesture of respect, then led his horse toward the stables, leaving Zara to wonder at the warmth spreading through her chest, and the smile she couldn't seem to suppress. That evening, their conversation over supper flowed more easily than ever before. Reed spoke of his plans for the ranch, expanding the horse breeding operation, possibly adding sheep if the cattle market continued its downward trend. Zara found herself offering suggestions about the kitchen garden, wondering aloud if they might add fruit trees near the house. Reed repeated with a smile. "You're thinking long-term then," Zara blushed, realizing what she'd implied. "I just meant I like it," he interrupted gently. "This place needs someone thinking beyond the next season, someone with vision." "Is that what you think I have? Vision?" "That and more." His eyes held hers across the table. "You have courage, Zara." To survive what you've endured and still find it in yourself to care about fruit trees and garden plots, that takes remarkable strength. No one had ever described her that way before. Zara had always thought of herself as ordinary, unremarkable. To be seen this way by Reed shifted something fundamental inside her. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to find more adequate words. Later, washing dishes in the kitchen while read in the great room, Zara found herself humming softly a lullaby her mother had sung, long forgotten until this moment of contentment brought it back. She didn't notice Reed in the doorway until he spoke. "That's lovely. What is it?" Zara jumped, nearly dropping the plate she was drying. "Oh, just an old song my mother used to sing. I hadn't thought of it in years." "Would you sing it properly? I'd like to hear it." His request was so earnest that Zara couldn't refuse, despite her self-consciousness. She set down the plate and dish towel, then began the simple melody, her voice tentative at first but growing stronger with each phrase of the gentle lullaby. When she finished, Reed's expression was one of quiet appreciation. "Beautiful," he said. "You have a gift." "Hardly a gift," she demurred. "Just a remembered song. Music is rare out here. We should have more of it." He stepped fully into the kitchen. "Do you play the piano? There's one in storage that belonged to the previous owner's wife. I never had reason to bring it out. I learned as a girl, though I'm out of practice. I'll have Miguel and the boys bring it in tomorrow." Reed's enthusiasm was infectious. "It can go in the corner of the great room by the east window." The piano arrived the following day, a handsome upright that, once tuned, proved to have a warm, rich tone. Zara spent her free moments rediscovering the joy of music, her fingers gradually remembering the pieces she'd learned in childhood. In the evenings, Reed would sometimes sit in the armchair near the piano, his eyes closed, listening as she played. "My mother loved music," he told her one night. "She taught piano to the neighbor children. On summer evenings, we'd leave the windows open and her playing would drift across the fields. You must miss her," Zara said gently. "Every day." Reed's gaze was distant. "She would have liked you, I think." The comment, casual as it was, stirred something in Zara's heart. She was beginning to care deeply for this quiet, thoughtful man who had rescued her from a fate worse than death. But she reminded herself of the reality of their situation. He was her employer, her contract holder. Any feelings beyond gratitude and respect would be inappropriate, possibly unwelcome. Yet sometimes, when Reed didn't know she was watching, Zara would catch him looking at her with an expression that made her wonder if perhaps he felt the stirrings of something more as well. May turned to June, and with the advancing summer came increased activity on the ranch. The cattle drive to summer pasture kept Reed and his men busy from dawn till dusk. Zara found herself preparing larger meals, packing provisions for the men to take with them on longer rides, and managing the household largely on her own, as Alina spent more time helping Miguel with ranch duties. One particularly hot afternoon, Zara was hanging laundry when she spotted Reed returning alone, his horse moving at an unusually slow pace. As they drew closer, she realized something was wrong. Reed was slumped in the saddle, one hand pressed to his side. Dropping the wet sheet back into the basket, Zara ran to meet him. "Reed, what happened?" "Nothing serious," he said through gritted teeth. "Steer caught me with its horn, just a scratch." But when he dismounted, his shirt was soaked with blood and he staggered slightly. Zara slipped her arm around his waist, supporting his weight as they made their way to the house. "A scratch doesn't bleed like this," she scolded, leading him to the kitchen. "Sit. Let me look at it." Reed obeyed, sinking onto a chair with a poorly disguised wince. Zara fetched water, clean cloths, and the box of medical supplies Alina kept for emergencies. When she returned, Reed had removed his vest but was struggling with the buttons of his shirt, his fingers clumsy with pain. "Let me," Zara said, gently moving his hands aside. She focused on the task, trying to ignore the intimacy of unbuttoning a man's clothing. When she eased the bloodied shirt away from his wound, she gasped. "This is no scratch, Reed. It's a deep gash." The wound curved along his ribs, about 4 inches long and deep enough to need stitching. Dried blood matted the dark hair on his chest, and fresh blood still seeped from the injury. "It looks worse than it is," Reed insisted, though his face had gone pale. "It needs stitches," Zara said firmly. "Where's Alina?" "South pasture with Miguel. Won't be back till evening." Zara bit her lip. "Then I'll have to do it myself." Reed's eyebrows rose. "You know how to stitch a wound." "I've seen it done." Her father had been injured more than once during their years on the homestead, and her mother had taught her basic medical care before she died. "It won't be pretty, but it will hold until we can get the doctor from town." She cleaned the wound thoroughly, her touch as gentle as possible despite Reed's sharp intake of breath when the disinfectant made contact with raw flesh. Threading a needle with catgut from the medical box, Zara took a steadying breath. "This will hurt," she warned. Reed nodded, his jaw set. "Do what you must." The first stitch drew a hiss of pain from him, but he remained still, his eyes fixed on a point above her head. Zara worked as quickly as precision allowed, each stitch neat and even. She was acutely aware of his bare skin beneath her fingers, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the warmth that radiated from him despite his injury. "You have a steady hand," Reed commented, his voice strained but appreciative. "And you're a good patient," she replied, tying off the final stitch. "Most men would be cursing by now." "Who says I'm not cursing inside my head?" The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Zara bandaged the wound, then helped Reed into a clean shirt she fetched from his room. The domesticity of the act, knowing where his clothes were kept, helping him dress, struck her suddenly. In just a few months, she had become intimately familiar with this man's home, his routines, his preferences. Yet there was still so much she didn't know about him. "You should rest," she told him, cleaning up the medical supplies. "That wound needs time to heal." "I can't afford to rest. We're short-handed as it is." "You can afford one day," Zara insisted. "The ranch won't fall apart if Reed Kincaid takes to his bed for 24 hours. Something in her tone must have convinced him, for he nodded reluctantly. "One day. But only because arguing with you takes more energy than I have right now." Zara helped him to his bedroom, a space she had cleaned but rarely entered when he was present. It was simply furnished like the rest of the house, but distinctly masculine, with a large 4-poster bed, a chest of drawers, and a desk piled with ranch accounts. The scent of him lingered here, leather and soap and something indefinably Raid. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, fatigue evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Thank you, Zara, for the stitching and for—" He gestured vaguely. "For badgering you into resting," she suggested with a smile. "For caring enough to badger," he corrected softly. Their eyes met, and Zara felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Standing this close to him, in the intimate space of his bedroom, it was difficult to maintain the pretense that he was merely her employer. Something had been building between them for weeks, unacknowledged but undeniable. "I do care," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Reed reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Zara, I adore," slammed in the main part of the house, followed by Alina's voice calling Zara's name. The moment broken, Zara stepped back. "Rest," she instructed. "I'll bring you some dinner later." As she hurried to explain the situation to Alina, Zara's mind lingered on what Reed might have been about to say. Her heart raced with possibilities, with hope, with fear. Was she imagining the connection between them? And even if she wasn't, what future could there be for a ranch owner and a woman who was, legally at least, still bound to him by a contract purchased from a brothel? The following days brought no resolution to these questions. Reed recovered quickly, returning to his duties despite Zara and Alina's protests that he should rest longer. He was unfailingly kind, unfailingly respectful, but something had shifted between them. A new awareness, a careful distance that hadn't been there before. June melted into July, bringing scorching heat and thunderstorms that rattled the windows but delivered little rain. Zara found herself watching the sky anxiously alongside Reed and the ranch hands, all too aware that drought could mean disaster for the cattle and horses that were the rocking Kincaid's lifeblood. "We may have to drive the herd farther north, to higher pastures," Reed explained one evening as they sat on the porch, seeking relief from the stifling heat inside the house. "There's still good grass up near the mountains. Will you go with them?" Zara asked, trying to keep the concern from her voice. "For part of the way. Miguel can manage once they're settled." Reed studied her face in the fading light. "Would it bother you if I were gone for a while?" The question seemed to hold more weight than its simple words suggested. Zara considered her answer carefully. "Yes," she said finally, "it would bother me. I've grown accustomed to your company at supper." "Just at supper?" There was a hint of something in his tone, hope perhaps, or challenge. Zara met his gaze directly. "Not just at supper." Reed's expression softened. "I've been thinking, Zara, about your contract." Her heart sank. Was he going to remind her of her place, set clearer boundaries between them? "I want to tear it up," he continued. "What?" She wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "The contract. I want to void it." Reed leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've more than earned your keep these past months. The debt is settled as far as I'm concerned." "But that would mean—" Zara trailed off, uncertain what it would mean exactly. "It would mean you're free to stay or go as you choose. Not because of an obligation, but because it's what you want." Reed's voice was low, intense. "And if you choose to stay, it would be as a free woman, not as someone bound by a piece of paper." The implications of his words gradually dawned on Zara. He was offering her true freedom, the ability to make her own choices without the shadow of debt hanging over her. "Why now?" she asked. Reed's gaze dropped to his hands. "Because I find myself wanting things I have no right to want while you're legally in my employment." The admission sent a thrill through Zara. "What things?" He looked up, his blue eyes dark with emotion. "I think you know, Zara." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken feelings. Zara's heart pounded so loudly she was certain Reed must hear it. "And if I choose to stay," she whispered, "then I would court you properly if you'd permit it." Reed's voice was rough with sincerity. "No contracts, no obligations. Just a man and a woman seeing if there might be something worth building between them." Zara felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. In the space of a few moments, her future had transformed from one defined by a debt not of her making to one full of possibility. "I would permit it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I would welcome it, in fact." Reed's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and achingly tender. "Then consider your contract void as of this moment, Miss O'Connor," he said formally. "And consider this my first act of courtship." Before Zara could respond, a crack of thunder split the sky, followed moments later by fat drops of rain. They both looked up in surprise and then laughed as the skies opened in a downpour, the first real rain in weeks. "A good omen," Reed said, not releasing her hand even as they retreated from the edge of the porch to avoid getting soaked. "For the ranch or for us?" Zara asked. "Both," he replied with certainty. The rain continued through the night, a steady, soaking shower that greened the pastures and filled the stock ponds. By morning, the crisis of drought had passed, at least temporarily. Reed no longer needed to drive the herd to northern pastures, which meant he would remain at the rocking K with Zara. Their courtship began simply. Reed brought Zara wildflowers he found while riding the range. She baked his favorite apple pie more often than strictly necessary. They lingered over supper, talking long after the meal was finished, sometimes moving to the porch to watch the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. Lena observed these developments with barely disguised delight. "It is good to see the patron smile so much," she told Zara as they worked together in the kitchen. "He has been too serious for too long." "He has many responsibilities," Zara said, though she too had noticed the change in Reed, a lightness that hadn't been there before, a readiness to laugh, to pause in his work to simply enjoy a moment. "A man needs more than work to make a life," Alina replied sagely. "He needs love, family." "You bring that possibility to the rocking K." The words stirred both joy and trepidation in Zara. What she felt for Reed had grown beyond simple gratitude or attraction. It was deeper, more profound, a recognition of something essential in him that called to something similar in her. But she still struggled with doubts. Their beginnings had been unusual, to say the least. Would the shadow of her near fate at the Silver Spur always linger between them? These fears eased somewhat when Reed took her into Humboldt for the first time since the night he'd rescued her. They traveled in the buggy, Zara wearing one of her new dresses, a pretty blue calico that complimented her eyes. Reed had business at the bank, and Zara planned to visit the general store for household supplies. "People will talk," she warned him as they approached the town. "About us arriving together." Reed's expression was unconcerned. "Let them. I'm proud to be seen with you, Zara." His words warmed her, but anxiety still fluttered in her stomach. Would she encounter anyone who remembered her from that night at the Silver Spur? Would Madame Lucille or Silas Donovan cross their path? As it happened, they encountered both. Donovan was exiting the bank as they arrived, his cold eyes widening slightly at the sight of Zara seated beside Reed in the buggy. Reed nodded curtly to the banker but offered no greeting, his hand protective at Zara's elbow as he helped her down. Later, as they walked from the general store to the dressmaker's shop, they passed Madame Lucille on the boardwalk. The madame's copper hair was elaborately styled, her dress fine but slightly too bright for daytime. Her sharp gaze took in Zara's transformed appearance and Reed's proprietary stance beside her. "Well, well," Lucille said, her voice carrying just enough to reach them without being overheard by others. "The investment paid off, I see. She's looking quite the proper lady, Mr. Kincaid." Reed's jaw tightened, but Zara spoke before he could. "Good day, Madame Lucille." "I trust business is well." The bland pleasantry, delivered with perfect composure, seemed to surprise the madam. She studied Zara more carefully, then nodded slowly. "Well enough. You were fortunate, girl, remember that." "I do," Zara replied evenly. "Every day." As they continued on their way, Reed squeezed Zara's hand where it rested on his arm. "You handled that with more grace than she deserved." "Her world is small and hard," Zara said. "I don't begrudge her what little power she thinks she has." Reed's gaze was admiring. "You continue to astonish me, Zara O'Connor." The remainder of their day in town passed without incident. Reed's clear regard for Zara was noted by the townsfolk, but the whispers that followed them were more curious than malicious. By the time they returned to the rocking K, Zara felt as though another shadow from her past had been faced and diminished. That evening, after supper, Reed suggested a walk. The air was cool after the recent rains, the landscape lush with new growth. They followed a path that led to a small stream that crossed the ranch property, where Reed had built a simple wooden bridge. They paused in the middle of the bridge, watching the water flow beneath them, golden in the last light of day. Reed seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous. "Is something wrong?" Zara finally asked. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything feels more right than it has in a very long time." He took a deep breath. "Zara, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you at the Rocking K has made it truly a home." The intensity in his eyes made Zara's heart race. "I feel the same," she said softly. "This place, these people, you have become my home too." Then, perhaps. Reed hesitated, then reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object. "Perhaps you would consider making it official." He opened his hand to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the fading sunlight and scattered it like stars. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The one thing I kept when I left Pennsylvania." Zara stared at the ring, then at Reed's face, hopeful, vulnerable, beloved. "Are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'll be my wife, Zara O'Connor. Not because of contracts or obligations, but because I love you, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears blurred her vision, but Zara's voice was clear and certain when she answered. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Reed Kincaid." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of promises, of futures, of love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. Their wedding took place in September, when the worst heat of summer had passed, but before the first chill of autumn. It was a small ceremony in the Humboldt church, attended by the ranch hands, a few neighbors, and the minister who had buried Zara's father just months before, but now spoke words of hope and new beginnings. Elena had helped Zara sew a simple but beautiful wedding dress of ivory silk, with lace that had belonged to Reed's mother trimming the collar and sleeves. Reed wore a new suit, his usual weathered appearance transformed into something almost elegant, though he still refused to tame the slight curl of his hair. "I married the rancher, not a city dandy," Zara teased when he apologized for his appearance. "I wouldn't have you any other way." The reception was held at the Rocking K, the ranch house decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Miguel had roasted a whole steer and Elena had baked for days. There was music and dancing, laughter and a few tears of joy. Even Silas Donovan, seeing which way the wind blew in Humboldt society, sent a wedding gift, a fine crystal vase that Zara graciously acknowledged while privately thinking it would look best stored in the attic. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Reed found Zara standing on the porch, watching the sunset paint the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. "Happy, Mrs. Kincaid?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into him. "If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would be standing here as your wife, I would have thought them mad." "Life has strange turns," Reed agreed. "But I believe we end up where we're meant to be, even if the path getting there is rougher than we'd choose." Zara thought of the path that had led her here, the grief of her father's death, the terror of Donovan's contract, the despair of the silver spur, and then the unexpected salvation that had come in the form of this good, honorable man who now held her heart. "I wouldn't change a step of it," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it, "because it all led me to you." Reed's kiss was tender, a seal on promises already made and kept. As twilight deepened around them, they stood together, silhouetted against the light spilling from the house, their home, their future, the place where a debt had been transformed into something precious beyond price. In the years that followed, the rocking K prospered under their joint care. Reed's horse breeding operation became renowned throughout Nevada and beyond, while Zara established a reputation for hospitality that made their home a gathering place for neighbors and travelers alike. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Reed's father, arrived a year after their wedding. A daughter, Margaret, followed 2 years later. The children grew strong and happy on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, absorbing their father's love of the land and their mother's appreciation for beauty in unexpected places. Zara never forgot where she had come from or how close she had come to a very different life. Each year, on the anniversary of the day Reed had brought her to the rocking K, she made a donation to a home for orphaned girls in Carson City, giving other young women the chances she had been fortunate enough to receive. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful, Reed would ask Zara to play the piano and sing the lullaby her mother had taught her. As the gentle melody filled their home, they would exchange glances that held all the gratitude, all the wonder, all the love that had grown between them, a love born from an act of kindness on a desperate night, nurtured through respect and understanding, and blooming into something that made all the hardships worthwhile. For Zara had indeed been sold to pay a debt, but what Reed Kincaid had purchased that night was not a woman's body but the chance to discover her heart. And in that discovery, they had both found redemption, had both found home.